Next on Newsmax Prime, is ISIS really winning? General Michael Hayden offers his evaluation. Then, despite some dubious dealing, Hillary is still ahead in the polls. Our political panel will talk about it. Plus, Michael Reagan reviews some of the stories and people making news, and we update the continued Christian persecution in the Mideast. It's Thursday, May 28th, and Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, the fight against ISIS. Ex-CIA Deputy Director John McLaughlin says ISIS can and will win by rolling right through Baghdad if there is no competent ground force to stop them. Meantime, U.S. fighter pilots say excessive bureaucracy is preventing the quick decisions needed for them to strike ISIS targets in Iraq and Syria. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest was on MSNBC's Morning Joe earlier today, and he said it's not unexpected to have ups and downs in battle, but don't look for American boots on the ground anytime soon.
This is consistent with what we see in military conflict, that there are going to be days of progress and there are going to be periods of setback. What the president believes is important are a couple of things. The first is we're not going to put U.S. military service members on the ground in a sustained combat operation. That's not in the best interest of our country. We're not going to do for the Iraqis what they must do for themselves.
And I'm joined now at the anchor desk by Newsmax contributor Miranda Khan. Let's get our intelligence briefing tonight from General Michael Hayden. He is the former director of both the CIA and the NSA. He joins us tonight from Newsmax Washington. General, thanks once again for being here on Newsmax Prime.
Thanks, JD, and good evening.
Let me just ask you this. Can ISIS win, as the former CIA deputy director maintains?
John McLaughlin, JD, is the best analyst I've ever known. And I read John's article last night. He actually sent me a copy of it. And it is stunning in its effect and in its analysis. And he lays out paths to victory for ISIS that are all plausible if we don't get our act together and do the right thing. And so, yes, it's quite possible that ISIS wins. And John defines that as essentially ISIS has this para-state the size of Belgium in the middle of the Middle East. In 1 or 2 years from now, ISIS is going to chalk that up as a victory.
General, I want to ask you, former governor turned presidential candidate George Pataki said this morning that he would support boots on the ground if elected. Has that time come?
Well, Miranda, we've got boots on the ground. We've got 3,000 pairs of boots on the ground. And so I think we're beyond that threshold. I think we need more boots on the ground. I think we're under-resourced. And more importantly, and you suggested this with your setup, JD, not just under-resourced, but over-regulated. Even the forces we have there now aren't free to do the kinds of things they're capable of doing. They're not free to move forward with Iraqi units below the brigade level. They're not free to have tactical air control parties forward in order to bring in precise air power. We don't use our special operations forces very often, although we did have one successful raid about 10 days ago. There are more things we could be doing even with the forces we have. But again, we're over-regulated and constrained.
Mike, you used the term over-regulated, and I mentioned a few minutes ago the frustration of American fighter pilots. One saying on national TV this morning, quote, "There were times when I had groups of ISIS fighters in my sights, but I could not get clearance to engage." Mike, is it time to change the rules of engagement? Who's to blame here? The Obama administration? The Pentagon? What's going on?
Well, JD, first thing I've got to say is I don't know the fine print. I'm not in government. I'm looking at the same things you're looking at, though. And it appears to me that the political control of this military effort is actually incredibly powerful. And what your aircrew member is seeming to suggest there, that before he can do some things in the theater, if they don't fit some very clearly pre-approved plan of action, this stuff is looking for political consent perhaps all the way back here to Pennsylvania Avenue.
General, I want to take a moment now and talk about Russia. Reports are out today that IRS investigators are able to point that massive data breach back to organized crime syndicates in Russia. Do you think the government was involved in any way?
I don't know that, Miranda, and I don't need the government involved to
how
view
big of a
this
threat,
to be
then, would you
a
say
very
Russia is?
dangerous act. I'm sorry?
How big of a threat, then, would you say Russia is?
Well, look, there are several layers of threats to the United States in the cyber domain. Governments are one, organized gangs are another, and frankly, Miranda, most of the organized gangs are in the post-Soviet space. They're in Russia, they're in Ukraine, they're in Belarus, they're in Moldova. And they operate with the, if I could say, almost the protection of the Russian government. The Russian government lets them do what they have to do as long as they shoot out, which apparently is what they did here, going after IRS records, I think, for criminal profit. And in return for that, I fully believe that from time to time the Russian Federation goes to these criminal gangs almost like they're a mafia don and say to the criminal gangs, now your don needs the service of you for the freedom of action that he's given you over the past months and years.
Almost subcontracting these
Yes.
mobsters to do the action that the Russian government may want to see done. Mike, there's something else that's a bit concerning. We learned yesterday about a new computer-killing weapon technology developed for the Air Force, but two of my former colleagues from Congress were on this program last night asking why the United States would be tipping our hand about having such a powerful weapon. Listen to their remarks.
It has the ability to turn a 21st century army into a 19th century army in 10 minutes. And it's really, really high-end stuff. And I don't know why we're talking about it out loud.
It makes absolutely no sense to run a PR campaign behind a new capability of the American military.
So, Mike, my question is this. Why is Boeing trumpeting this? Why are others in Washington talking about this technology?
JD, once again, the real answer is I don't know. Now, if it really depends a bit on what effect are you trying to create. If you want to keep this weapon in your kit and have it to spring on an enemy, obviously you don't want to talk about it. On the other hand, if your purpose here is to deter an enemy's action, then secrecy doesn't contribute to deterrence. I don't know the math that was used to solve this problem. I'm a bit surprised, just like my friend Chairman Hoekstra was, that we made this public, but I just don't know enough to actually go out of my way to condemn it.
General, let's talk a moment now about the Patriot Act. Only a few days before important provisions go into effect, because the Patriot Act is set to expire, with ISIS becoming more of a global threat, how big of a national security concern is that to you?
It's important enough for me to write about it and comment on it, Miranda. Look, we've got a lot of tools out there now, but this is one of them, all right? Does the world end if we lose it? Probably not, at least on most days, but we do lose an important tool. And Miranda, this tool is under assault not because it's illegal or not because it's been operationally misused. This tool is under assault for political reasons. And JD, I know where you used to work. I know politics really matter, but do we really want to give up something in our quiver simply out of political concerns when operationally it's done and been used the way it's supposed to have been used, and legally it is actually quite lawful? That's the question I ask, and if you're asking for my vote here, Miranda, I say reauthorize the Patriot Act as written.
Mike, it's interesting. We've got 20 seconds for your reaction to this. The Hill featured a headline earlier today saying Obama officials accused the Senate of playing, quote, Russian roulette with the Patriot Act. Do you think that's a fair assessment? 20 seconds.
Look, I don't want to get involved in any political gamesmanship here. The Congress has a role here. The Congress needs to step up and make a decision and not keep dribbling the ball. The American intelligence community needs to know where the lines are, and that's a product of the political process. Get on with it.
General Michael Hayden, you have our thanks. Miranda Kahn, thanks for sitting in as well. When we come back, Larry Elder and David Goodfriend, our political panel. Stay with us. There's more ahead.